So with this image, in some ways we're also saying, what does an artist have to do to get an audience? Does a dancer have to dance with you on the way to work for you to care about their art form? And if you're a photographer, does a photographer have to run a marathon with you and take pictures at the same time for you to care about their images? And the answer is yes, they do. Only recently have I become aware of the importance of marketing and making your images important to other people. And about 3.5 years ago, what I did was ran 3 half marathons and took pictures at the same time. It was one of those experiences that you create because I'm always making visual puzzles for myself. I'm usually trying to create and make things harder. So I'm actually running the race with an SLR and taking pictures. So the problem with this is how focus works. Your camera likes to be standing still and focus on things that are moving. If you're moving and the camera is moving, your focus system is useless. So what I ended up having to do was run beside the runner and find out what pace they were running at, and talk to them, explain what I was doing. I'm taking pictures for the marathon, and I'm just going to take a quick picture as you're running. And I would find out what pace they were running at. And they would be running there, and then I'd get in front of them and start running backwards. That's how ridiculous it was. And I'd have to make sure I was at a very similar pace as they were, so that the distance between us was not changing, so your focus system works. It was kind of a technical hurdle and kind of a silly, crazy thing to do. And if you look at this image here, one of the crazier things I did was actually take a picture of myself while I was running, which seems ridiculous, and it is, but I was part of this story, and I needed to take this image. But at the same time, you can imagine me holding my arms up and trying to take this picture. But in the series of images, you have all these point of view shots, and if you have a point of view, you need to know who's the point of view taking these images. And as a photographer and filmmaker, most of you know in this room that you don't have a lot of pictures of yourself. In fact, you probably have very little, if maybe almost no pictures. You can flip through my family albums and you can't find me sometimes, because I am the one taking the pictures. So I think eventually one of the series that I may force myself to do is a series of self-portraits. And believe me, that's going to be a lot harder than running a marathon and taking pictures. And that's what I've always been doing, is creating challenges for myself in an attempt to create visual puzzles that I can solve, sort of advancing my image making. The next thing that I tried to do was take a series of non-traditional images of Rome. It was an attempt to make Rome not look like Rome. When I went on this trip, I had some rules. No statues, no water fountains, no major tourist areas. So for the first few days, I was overwhelmed by the architecture and all the art, and I almost gave up. I thought, this is impossible. This is a city that has been photographed since the beginning of the photographic image, and my goal was to try to shoot the city in a way that had never been done before. So what I ended up doing was dividing the city up into squares, and I walked the city for the next 10 days. I avoided the major tourist areas, and I actually walked every alley in the center of Rome. And these images were created and put into a book, and that book is called The Alleys of Rome. So what I really am is someone who creates visual problems for myself, and I try to solve them. I find visual ways to convey what I'm thinking, what I am feeling, and what I'm seeing. The goal is to make images that have an impact. There's more to them than just the image. So when I took these pictures at Rome and I did the marathon, in some ways I was trying to distract myself. I was trying to make photography harder. And obviously, I succeeded in making it harder. But what I kept realizing is that I was drawn to images that were more metaphoric and images that were moving. So at this time, I started being drawn back to the moving image. The first visual metaphors that I started working on was sort of an attempt to make fun of fashion photography. There were a series of images that were questioning what fashion photography is. There were editorial images. The goal was to make you look at an image twice. The first of the images was a screaming geisha. A geisha is supposed to be very, very quiet and polite and cultured. They wouldn't be pictured screaming, and they also wouldn't be caught smoking. So these images were designed to catch attention, to make you look at them twice. The images eventually led me to a newspaper-covered dress. And if you zoom in on this dress, what it actually says in the text that we put on is, I need what I want, and what I want is what you tell me I need. So the metaphors became more and more and more precise. So sometimes the images became the metaphors that we were trying to create, but you could read them. They weren't just images anymore, so we were mixing media. In the last part of this series, we made a measuring tape dress. And the reason the series stopped there was because when you make images that make fun of fashion photography, they end up looking like fashion photography. So it seemed to be you ended up doing what everyone else is doing anyway. So I sort of abandoned that series of images, but the main reason was because this dress inspired a film. And that film was called Measuring Tape Girl. That seems to happen to me a lot, where a painting can inspire a photograph can inspire a film. The line's kind of blurred for me. I have trouble explaining the difference between a painting, a photograph, and a film. I've always tried to make my photographs look like a painting. For me, a film is a moving photograph. So over the years, I've sort of decided what the story needs. And this image didn't need a photograph anymore, it needed a film. So you're sort of bound to what the story requires. Over the last 6 to 7 years, I've been overwhelmed by the power of the moving image, the power of pictures with sound. As I've done with photography, I've sort of created a bunch of challenges for myself that sort of make me keep growing and learning about things. Some recent examples include the politics of fear. In this film, I had to make sound a major characteristic. Basically, the goal was that the sound in this movie represented the psychological feelings of the character. And then it led me to another challenge. In my next film, In the Day in the Life, I was studying how you transition from one scene to another. Basically, how you move the character from one part of the movie to the next. Transitions are very important in filmmaking, and they move a story forward. As you notice in this film, there's a dancer dancing on a bus. She dances at work, she dances at home, she dances in a park. No matter where she is and what she's doing, she's still a dancer and she's still an artist. In my latest film, Measuring Tape Girl, we've sort of gone the other way. I've thrown away all of my camera tricks and all the weird angles, and we've sort of gone back to the core of filmmaking. I've tried to focus on dialogue, character development, and storytelling, and on acting. So in this particular film, there's one character talking to the camera. That's all they're doing, talking to the camera. And it's one character, one person telling the story. With film and photography, we're documenting our way of seeing the world. We're documenting our perspective. What's interesting is how our perspective can grow and change. A painting can change into a photograph can change into a film, an image can become an experience. If a picture is an experience, if a picture is a moment in time captured, it is a reflection of who we were when we took that photograph. If it sheds light on ourselves and tells us something about who we are, it can give us hope. And if a picture can give us hope, then whoever takes the most pictures and tells the most stories before they die wins.